Welcome back. We are talking about the unthinkable for many of us, the possibility that perhaps triggered by a, well, unsatisfactory outcome in prospect for Vladimir Putin, that he may act to use nuclear weapons to try to decide the conflict on his terms and to keep everyone else from interfering with his accomplishment of what seems now to be pretty much the wholesale destruction of Ukraine. Peter Huessy is our guest. He's a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute and a specialist on nuclear strategy and policies and arms control and programs. And it's always good to have a chance to visit with him. And Peter, you were talking, I'm sorry we had to break there, about China's long term involvement in a nuclear weapons buildup of its own and how that might tie into, well, Putin's calculations about what he can get away with. Finish that thought, if you would.
It's very important to understand that we often get accused of our modernization is triggering their modernization, kind of a tit for tat. China started their modernization in 1999, the same year Putin put his plans together. And China called up Ukraine and said, would you teach us how to build a mobile launcher for big ICBMs? And the Ukrainians specialized in that during the Cold War because they were part of the Soviet Union and deployed the SS-18s and SS-24s. So they helped China, and it was a money thing, I think, by and large for Ukraine. But China now is in the business of building to a minimum of 1,000 warheads. My view is others, analysts are right about this, that they're going to multiple thousands. And they've adopted the same policy as Putin with respect to not Ukraine, but Taiwan, which is if you, America, come to the defense of Taiwan, we're going to nuke you. Now, what did they say with respect to that? Well, Japan said that Japan would come to the defense of Taiwan if attacked. And China said, oh, really? If you do, we will nuclear attack you over and over again until, quote, you surrender for the second time as you did in World War II. So that's a very explicit threat to use nuclear weapons against an ally of the United States, Japan, that is not nuclear armed, but that China would have no compulsion about using nuclear weapons against. That tells you the seriousness with which China is basically joining Russia in the same kind of strategy.
Yeah. And Peter, this brings us to, unfortunately, deep, well, concern that I have about the adequacy of our deterrent and whether it may be causing both the Russians and the Chinese to believe that they can not only make such threats, but perhaps act upon them with impunity. You've studied closely the condition of our nuclear forces over the years. You've, as I said, convened many, many conversations with senior officials talking about both where we are now and where we better get to. Give us a snapshot at the moment as to the condition of the U.S. nuclear forces, tactical theater as well as strategic, if you would.
Well, they're old. Our ICBMs are going to be 55 years before they are replaced. Our submarines are going to be 40, and our bombers are going to be around 60. And we went on a holiday for close to 4 decades without modernizing. We basically ended everything in the 1990s. Stopped the submarines, stopped the ICBMs, and stopped the bombers. We're now basically since 2010 on a path to modernize starting in 2029, ending in 2042. The question is, we have a window of vulnerability, as Reagan would say, between now and then, where we are basically modernizing 40 some $billion a year, which is good. The problem is the administration has, we never thought we had to build theater, regional, tactical nuclear weapons. We kind of almost got out of that business. And we killed the B-2083, which is the only bomb that we have that can go deeply underground and get bunkers where leaders are. And we killed that in the nuclear posture review coming out. The administration said they're not going to fund it. They also said we're not going to fund the Navy cruise missile, which would be nuclear armed, again, a theater system. They did say we're not going to adopt a no first use, but we're going to say something, well, nuclear weapons fundamentally only responding to nukes, so we'll leave it open with respect to cyber, chemical, or biological attacks. The problem is we have no room to slow down. We have no room for error. We are basically trying to catch up. And as I said, we're not we won't be done this until 2042.
Yeah, and that's
And so
that's
we
the
got
thing that
a
is
long
so
way to go.
concerning, isn't it? That there is this window of vulnerability, to use my old boss's expression. And Peter, to the extent that we are going to have to, you know, make stopgap efforts while that modernization program hopefully goes forward, I'm very worried about the Biden administration's posture review and so on, possibly jeopardizing that, though it seems less likely in this environment. But the question is, one of the tactical systems that we still have in the inventory, although not deployed, are these nuclear armed sea launched cruise missiles, the TLAM N, as they used to be called, Tomahawk land attack nuclear missiles. What is their status at the moment, and could they be reintroduced into the naval forces, submarine as well as surface ships, and bring to bear something in this stopgap period that might increase that deterrence to the Chinese as well as, of course, the Russians?
Well, we could build them, and the current budget there was research money and development money, but the nuclear posture review has proposed to delete that funding for fiscal year 23, which is the year coming up October 1st. So
But let me ask you,
unfortunately,
my impression was that we still had them in the inventory. They're old, yes, but not as old as some of the other stuff as you just mentioned, Peter.
no,
But are
they
they
have
all now gone?
the Obama administration got rid of them. The Trump administration said no, we need to do some R&D to bring them back. The question is, you probably would have to redo the warheads and redo some of the missiles, because you can't just get them out of the inventory and put them on board a ship. You're going to have to do some work. That is going to be both Republicans and Democrats on the House and Senate Armed Services Committee have said in so many words, reading between the lines, we need to keep that as a possibility. Jack Reed, the chairman of the House Senate Armed Services Committee, a Democrat from Rhode Island, has said, I'm in favor of full up nuclear modernization. As Mr. Cooper, who is the subcommittee chairman in the House, he wrote a piece with the ranking Republican recently saying we need to modernize fully. And he was pushing back on arms control groups saying, oh, we've got more than enough. We've got this new fuse weapon that has doubled the number of hard target kills we can take care of. When he said, no, 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 it isn't done that. So I think in Congress, they don't share the Biden administration's view that we need to cut. I think almost 80 some odd percent of them say, no, we need to modernize fully, particularly
Well,
given what Russia and China are doing.
from your lips to God's ears, this is very good news if it's
I
true.
hope I'm right.
I'm a little dubious about it, frankly, given some of the characters, including in the leadership. But Peter, let me just ask you this, because it's a piece of this story that I think you have become deeply knowledgeable about over the years, but most of the rest of us know nothing of, and that is the condition of our industrial capacity to maintain these nuclear forces, to modernize or rebuild old ones, if you will. Just take a minute quickly to talk a little bit about that,
Well,
if you would.
industrial base is basically, I don't want it to get any smaller, and I wish it was bigger, because they have very little leeway in terms of if funding goes down. You can't have people sitting around doing nothing. Okay. And if that industrial base goes away, whether subs, bombers, or ICBMs, you don't just call up, the employment agency and get new ones. So you've got to put people to work. Now, that doesn't mean, oh, I'm just putting them to work for employment purposes. But if you don't have an industrial base of modernization, as Admiral Richards said, you have one choice: you get out of the nuclear business.
Right,
And
and I
and
fear that we're very far down that road. And Peter Huessy, we have
our
to
old
leave it at
friend,
that. The main thing is that the industrial infrastructure, the enterprise, if you will, has aged along with all of these weapons.
it
Much of it
definitely,
is obsolete as well. We
absolutely,
not only need to upgrade those facilities, but also to make sure we've got qualified people manning them.
particularly in the
Peter
Department of
Huessy,
Energy.
we have to thank you for your time today. Come back to
Thank,
us again, if you would, very soon
thank
with
you, sir.
updates on this hugely important topic. Next up, we're going to speak to a valiant freedom fighter, a whistleblower from Google by the name of Zach Voorhees, with a plan for what to do to protect free speech. Right after this.